Hello and welcome to the Open Day PowerPoint about the MA Creative Writing and Publishing. I'm the program leader, Brad Giori. So why choose the MA Creative Writing and Publishing at BU? Well, for one thing, it's taught by a staff of published, produced, and award-winning writers and people that aren't just resting on their laurels but are actively writing. And I think that's very helpful because if you're bringing your work in and you want somebody to give you useful feedback on it, it's very helpful to have people that are actively writing. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. It's a combination of both creative work and industry focused work. There's a practical component to it, which you can hear in the publishing part of the title. There's also marketing and PR built into it. So the idea is not only to do creative work, but to get it out into the world and find ways to sort of support your career. Also, there's a critical component. We want you to be able to look at your work, not just in terms of how can it be improved creatively, but how does it sit within sort of the larger discourse that you're a part of in the fields that you're working and operating within. There's also a transmedia and a new media emphasis, this idea that we're aware of what's happening and how digital media is changing the way narratives are structured. And we encourage that. And in fact, we build assignments around that get you thinking in new ways about new ways to create stories. There's also cross collaborative learning opportunities, chances to sort of work with other writers, work in teams, and also a great deal of individualized study and including some one-on-one tutorial sessions. So a little bit about the BU campus. I've been teaching here for about 5 years now, and I have to say it's just getting more and more. It's improving. It was kind of sort of a little bit dull and gray when I started, but now these new buildings are cropping up, and some of them are pretty impressive. So you can see in this slide the Fusion building, the new Subu building, and then the Pool Gateway building that's being finished now. Great facilities that are really enjoyable to work in. Oops. So on to the staff I had alluded to before. You can see these are works by people who or will be teaching you. They cover a nice range, I think, of different writing styles that are reflected in the teaching that our staff does that sort of play to the strengths. So you can see, Jim Pope's young adult novel, Semi-Perfect. He's written several young adult and children's stories. An epic poem by our poet, Tom Masters, brilliant guy. Shelley's Heart, my locative interactive fiction work that was released in conjunction with the 200th anniversary of publication of Frankenstein in 2018 and tied into St. Peter's Church. It's something you can actually experience on your phone as you walk around the churchyard where Mary Shelley's buried, which is in Bournemouth Town Center. Jailbird Detective, part of a series by Helen Jacey, who teaches our marketing and PR class. She's got another in this series coming out this year. This is one of many books about style by Emma Scattergood, who teaches at Design Editing and Publishing and leads Fresher, well-published author. And then Simon Frost, one of his critical works on the business of the novel, he's one of our teachers who helps you look at your work from a more critical perspective. I should say that a lot of us as well have published scholarly articles in journals. So the autumn, how does this break down? Well, here's an example of some of these courses. Maybe I won't read the text verbatim, but so if you were to start out in the autumn, you would take writing fiction with me. This would be where we would sort of do the deep dive into your creative work, and you'd be doing a prose assignment, and you'd also do what's called a transmedia pitch, where you would imagine taking this prose work, and if you were to spin it off in different ways, what would you make of it? There's interactive storytelling. You can see the new media and the digital elements in some of this. Interactive storytelling by Jim Pope. And we'll talk more about his New Media Writing Prize here in a moment. But this is a chance to do all kinds of interesting, and again, like pushing you to work outside of the envelope. I should say it's an overused phrase, but there's a software program that Jim uses called Generator, as in generating a narrative. Um, that is a very simple drag and drop system that can make branching narratives, and he'll show you how to use that if you want. But students are also encouraged to do all kinds of things, and I've seen really imaginative works. People coming up with sort of board games that are stories, a dollhouse that is something that you interact with and create stories out of it, a bucket that you fish out of to and a story emerges. All kinds of interesting things that come out of this class. Cultural and critical influences. This is our poet Tom, um, who is deceptively young. He knows everything, and yet he's actually a fairly young person. So it's kind of it's a deep well of information that you get from Tom. And what's nice about it is, while he can talk, about all kinds of things and great detail and depth, if you ever get a bit overwhelmed with his erudition, you can always put your hand up, and he's very patient and will help guide you with it. And another thing that's great about Tom's classes is he puts in a practical component, and there's the option of doing, even though there's this, you can hear in the title, there's a critical dimension of it. The assignments, you're welcome to, if you don't want to do sort of a traditional essay assignment in this class, which is sort of a survey of 20th and 21st century literature, you can also do a creative work that sort of reflects that literature that's discussed in the class, and then write a short critical reflection on what you've done and why you've done it. But in these workshop sessions that he runs, you'll also actively be doing creative works within the class. So all of these include a very strong hands-on component. In the spring, there's marketing and PR for writers with Helen Jacey, who is, like I said, has a new book coming out. She's marketing and doing PR for her own book right now. So she has a lot to say about this. And this is about to really get you thinking about how to do this for your own work. And also, I'm, as the program leader, I'm always looking for projects that we as a group can be creating and bringing out into the world. So some of those things actually wind up getting promoted through this class. Publishing Cultures, Cuneiform to Kindle by Dr. Simon Frost. This is our, one of our strong critical analysis people. He's going to take you through the entire history of publishing and really giving you a critical dimension, a way of looking at it, which is wonderful when you're going out into the world with your own work and you're trying to position it and see, when you're talking to publishers, what's unique about what I'm doing? Where does it sit within this sort of larger field? Also, this is an effective course for when you're doing your dissertation at the end and you need to reflect critically on what you're doing creatively. Design, Editing, and Publishing with Emma Scattergood. This is a very practical course in a lot of ways. One thing, it's tied into Emma's Fresher Writing Prize, which is a international prize that also has a spin-off prize, which is a children's prize. Both have been very successful. And the students get involved in everything from judging it to editing the copy that goes into it, to actually creating the book covers and voting on the winners for that amongst themselves. So it's a very hands-on course that has an actual practical public-facing output related to it, which I think is a good thing when you're doing this type of work, because you see the relevance of it, you see how it works, you're operating on something that isn't just sort of abstract, but is actually going out into the world. And then there's dissertations. These can happen either in spring or summer, depending on whether you started in January or whether you started in September. So Emma, again, is our dissertation supervisor. The dissertation is a project that's a culmination of everything you're going to do. So as I've said, you've got this. There's a 10,000 word creative artifact is 2/3 of it, and then there's a third of it, which is a 5,000 word critical reflection on the piece. you're welcome to have things tie together. So, for instance, in my writing fiction class, often people are writing a chapter of a book that they want to continue to develop throughout the degree. And this is a good place to really do more of that, to do maybe a couple more chapters, and then reflect on them. Now, for the part time track, those of you who wish to do this, this is basically the way it looks now. It may change depending on whether you start in January or September, but basically, the part time person, this is what they're doing of these different years. You can see what's happening in autumn and in spring. Basically, to give you a general summary of it, in the first year, you're taking two courses in the autumn, two courses in the spring. By the second year, you're just taking one course in the autumn, one in the spring, and then there's the dissertation over the summer. So that's kind of how it shakes out. How will you be taught? Well, it's a combination of all different types of learning for different types of learning styles. There is some lecture. I know writers tend to be very hands-on, wanting to get lots of feedback, but there is sometimes a bit of overt instruction is helpful when you're talking about general concepts. So, for instance, in my writing fiction class, where we're doing a lot of craft-oriented things, it's helpful to discuss things like story structure, narrative arcs, the character arcs, things like that. Then there are seminars where it's a more interactive sort of approach. Although I will say, let me back up for a second. Those lectures are actually fairly interactive. We have things called stretches built into them where there's little writing exercises, and you seldom are you just sitting there passively for a long period of time. Then there's the seminars, which tend to be more interactive. We get in more in detail about things. Tutorials, we do one-on-one tutorials. I do every semester. I will meet with each student for 20 minutes in the capacity as a program leader, and then the unit leaders also meet with people. So, for instance, in the autumn, I wind up doing 2 rounds of tutorials because I do them sort of as a program leader, and then I do them as a unit leader. Um, the workshops are where we actually look at the material that you've created, and you feed back on your fellow writers, and they feed back to you. And of course, the staff offers feedback and notes as well. We do a lot of what's called formative assessment. So, in other words, you're not just sort of flying blind and wondering, well, I hope I'm doing the right thing, and I won't know till I get to the very end and I hand in my assignment and I'll see how I did. Instead, we're looking at drafts of your work throughout the semester. So, for instance, in my writing fiction course, you're going to do a draft one of the prose assignment, get feedback on it, then you do a rewrite of it, then you get feedback on that, and then you do the final hand in. So you have a pretty good sense by the time you're handing in what some of the concerns have been. And those practical sessions are also sort of that type of thing where we can work with you if you need some help with technology and things like that. There's different types of independent learning that we encourage, things like reading books and journal articles, working on group projects, putting presentations together. Sometimes that's something that we do in the different courses, working in the library, and of course the written assignments are the core of a lot of this. Here's a couple other things to be on your radar. I mentioned the Fresher Prize in relation to Emma Scattergood. This is something that's going on throughout the year, so even when you're not taking the course with her, Emma's always looking for help with this. It's a great way to really get your hands dirty and get a sense of what it's like to work on an actual published project. So you can maybe take note of these details. This is how you can check the website and how you can contact Emma. Jim Pope does the New Media Writing Prize, recently celebrating 10 years of honoring people who were creating digital narratives, things that could not exist without some sort of new media. I personally supervise the judging of the Journalism Prize, and it's really it's an honor to do this because you see people like a recent winner who created something about prisons in Egypt, and you see this person really risking their lives to create this work, and it's also highly innovative. So this is a great celebration of some of the most interesting things I think out there, and it's nice that it's coming out of our university. So entry requirements for the MA: a bachelor's honor degree, two, and a required subject. Required subjects include communication, creative writing, English literacy, cultural studies, film, history. Applicants are also asked to submit a portfolio and a personal statement. So a little bit about that. So here's some portfolio tips. Maybe around 1,000 words. We're not sticklers about this type of thing. You'll see this is fairly flexible. It can be any kind of writing, any genre or tone. It can be a bunch of pieces. It can be one piece. You can demonstrate a bunch of approaches if you're somebody that likes to do a lot of things. I'm kind of that type of person. I have a lot of different voices that I work in. Or you may have one signature approach that you've really refined, and that's what you want to do. That's perfectly fine too. The main thing is just share something that really expresses your unique voice or voices. In terms of the personal statement, I think the thing is you're just tying your life into this work. So, you know, look at your life experiences, tie it to your love of writing. Give us a sense of why you like to write, and how what you like to write about, and how it relates to what you've been through in your life. Um, Look at also maybe an expression of how you're committed to storytelling outside of when it's just assigned to you to do. Examples of how you do this for the pleasure of it, and what types of things interest you in terms of creativity. Examples of how you've worked with other people, contributed to teams, things like that. And what your strengths and weaknesses are. Hearing somebody talk about that candidly, and in a balanced way, I think is really helpful, because I think that's one of the things we really try and cultivate in this overall, is this ability for critical thinking, which is where you don't beat yourself up unnecessarily, but you also don't inflate your ego unnecessarily, and you have the balance where you can say, here's what I need to do better, here's how I can improve, and here is what I'm getting right, and this is what's working. And I think if you can demonstrate that with your personal statement, I think that's a nice sign that here's somebody that's really operating at a high level in terms of critical analysis, and can offer that type of feedback to other people. In other words, isn't going to be withholding positive things if they can identify and say positive things, but can also talk about things, that areas for improvement, but do it in a constructive way. So an example of a typical week, would be from the autumn schedule. So one of the great things about the way our schedule is working now, it's almost entirely, both for the autumn and the spring, it's almost always Tuesdays and Thursdays. I've consolidated it. It makes it so much easier. Occasionally we'll have a class on a Friday, especially instances where that occurs, and we like you to be able to be free for those. But in general, you can work your schedule around this. It makes it much easier, because MA students are often busy and working and have other schedules to can think about. So this makes it easier. The other thing is, because of this, please bear in mind, this isn't designed for distance learning. This is very much brick and mortar delivery. We expect people to turn up and engage and be here, and we expect people to offer feedback to their fellow writers, to do the work, to read what's the readings, to respond to them, all of that type of stuff. But on our side, we've organized it in such a way that I think it makes it for a really focused and efficient way of learning. So on a Tuesday, for instance, typical Tuesday, you start off bright and early, 9 a.m., go to 10:30 for interactive storytelling. That's a lecture. So that'll be Jim talking to you about interactive storytelling. Then there's a gap there. You get to 1 to 3, you're going to have a seminar session where you're actually going to be working on these projects. And then, kind of a long day this day, from 4 to 6, you get the writing fiction lecture with me, and talking about different strategies for doing creative work. So then we skip forward to a Thursday, typical Thursday in the autumn, 10 to 11, cultural and critical influences with Tom, lecture there, just 1 hour. Skip forward to noon to 2, there's cultural and critical influences. That's a workshop session with Tom, actually doing things, creating stuff. And then at the end of the day, from 4 to 6 o'clock, writing fiction workshop with me. And there we're going over some of the work that you've actually submitted, and you're giving feedback to your peers and receiving feedback from them as well. And finally, there's academic advisor sessions throughout the year, both with the PL, that's with me, the program leader, and the unit leaders. Those are those one-on-one sessions that happen both face-to-face and sometimes over Skype. So here's an example of a typical class. I won't bore you by going into every little detail, but this is sort of a semester of, for instance, I'm using the example of my writing fiction class, and you'll see it's a combination. These are weeks. The numbers represent the different weeks of the semester. You'll see that most weeks that you have two things going on. There'll be a lecture and a workshop. Occasionally you'll have a week where it's just a lecture. We try and do a variety of different things that are all very germane to your improvement as a writer. So you'll see as you look through these, by the time you've gone through these classes and these workshops, you've really developed quite a bit. There's also what's called a master class, which is where we have the students work as teams and do a presentation for one of the class sessions. It's a good sort of it's a bonding experience, but also is an opportunity for us to sort of harness the collective intelligence of the group, and I always learn a lot from those sessions. So finally, a few more things. We've got the outreach that we do. There's a Doppelganger Productions, which I'm very involved in. I'm a director of. They have a number of offshoots. It's a local theater group. We do something called Doppelganger Dialogues, where we meet once a month at Chaplin's Cellar Bar in Boscombe and do people present readings. I often present some of my own stuff there. Students present their own work there. We definitely encourage you to get involved with that. Doppelganger also has an acting workshop that people that we interact with. Sometimes we get some of the actors from that workshop to come and read our work at the dialogues. I've taught a couple of those workshops because I direct as well. And brought in some theatrical pieces of my own to have the actors do. Really fun to work with. Then there's Bournemouth Emerging Arts Fringe. We work with them quite a bit. This year, we're actually putting on a showcase of the MA students' works as part of the Fringe Festival, sort of a cabaret night that will showcase our student work. There's Nerve Radio. A number of our students work at Nerve. It's a great way to keep honing your writing skills and learn a bit of journalism. Obviously there's Bournemouth campus itself, and we do things with that. This year we're thinking of putting together a display, a showcase of student work in the new Pool Gateway building on the Talbot campus, and promoting that through the marketing and PR class. There's the Arts University Bournemouth. And I have to say that is not the most artistic logo they have going there. A little critique. They need some more flavor in their logo for such a creative school. But we know some people over there. I'm friends with Mary Oliver, who's the dean of media production, and then Charmaine K. Parkin is a friend of mine. She teaches acting classes over there, and we have access through Charmaine to actors who can work with us if we're thinking of doing things along those lines, more scripted material. And then the bottom corner here, you can see our writing Witches and Wizards. This is something that Emma puts on, where we go to local schools and promote literacy with kids. It's a lot of fun. It's another form of outreach that we do that we're always looking for people to help out with. Some BU resources to know about. We have Brightspace, which is sort of the online interface where we use to coordinate all of our assignments, submissions, communication with classes. You'll learn a lot more about that moving forward. Our campus is open 24 hours a day, which is great. You can get to the library anytime and get into those computers. They have all kinds of software and ebooks and things that are accessible. There's also bookable spaces. If you want to put something together, you want to do a meeting, you can actually book rooms out. And then there's the student union, SUBU. It's a great resource to work through, and our student reps work through them. And that's a good way of communicating, interacting with the staff, and having a voice. So finally, come join us here at BU. And if you can make it into an actual physical open day, I'd love to meet you and hear more about what you're working on. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye.